Before we begin, let me ask you something. What would you do if the one thing holding your family together was slipping through your fingers, rent overdue dreams, fading, and life asking more of you than you have left to give? And then, out of nowhere, a stranger steps into your world in the most unexpected way. Tonight's story follows a single dad doing everything he can to protect his little girl, and a woman whose quiet act of kindness sparks a chain of events neither of them could have predicted. It's a story about hope showing up in unlikely places, about the courage to trust again, and how a single moment can reshape the blueprint of an entire life. Settle in, take a deep breath, because this journey is one you'll want to hear all the way to the end. Single dad. Took his daughter to dinner, but a billionaire. Heiress saw them and did the unbelievable. The morning started with a sound that always felt too loud for such a small apartment, the sharp click of an old alarm clock trying to shake a tired man awake. Gavin Holt lay still for a moment, listening to the familiar rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. It was steady, almost comforting, until another sound slid under the door, the rustle of paper. He knew that sound far too well. A thin envelope scraped across the floor as the draft pushed it forward. Gavin exhaled the breath rough in his chest and rose to his feet. The floorboards creaked beneath him, a soft complaint from a building that had endured too many winters. He bent down, picked up the envelope, and didn't need to open it to know. Eviction. Notice. 30 days. No extensions. His fingers tightened around the paper. For a second he allowed himself the sting of failure fear, that familiar coil of dread knotting beneath his ribs. Then a small voice floated from the bedroom. Dad. Are you awake? Mia's voice always came with a tiny lilt, like she was halfway through a dream she wasn't ready to leave. Gavin slid the notice into the junk drawer, shut it quietly, and turned just as she padded out in socked feet. She rubbed her eyes, then grinned up at him. Guess what? We're drawing the future house today. My teacher said my picture got a gold star. Gavin forced a smile, warm but strained at the edges. That? So a gold star? Huh. That's worth celebrating. She nodded eagerly and tugged at his sleeve. Can we go to the diner tonight? You promised. A celebration dinner. He hesitated, but only for a heartbeat. She didn't miss much. She'd see hesitation. So he ruffled her hair and said, Of course, kiddo. Her joy was instant and bright, filling the room like a string of bells. During his shift, the world shrank down to the sounds of maintenance work, the faint hum of fluorescent lights, the hiss of pipes, the dripping from a stubborn faucet. Gavin tightened for the third time. He moved through the building hallways with the practiced quiet of someone who'd learned to never draw attention. A worn tool belt rested against his hip. The mop bucket squeaked faintly as he pushed it. Every break he got, he pulled from his pocket a folded sheet Mia's house, a scribbled blueprint of dreams he'd abandoned years ago when architecture school slipped through his fingers. He traced one corner with his thumb and imagined a window seat, a reading nook, a backyard where Mia could plant whatever flowers 7-year-olds believed could change the world. He listened to the soft graphite scratch as he refined a line. That sound. It always calmed him. Maybe because it felt like proof he hadn't completely let go. That night, the diner welcomed them with its usual swirl of sounds, pans, sizzling chairs scraping the linoleum floor, a waitress calling order up an old radio playing some forgotten country tune. Mia bounced in the booth, her excitement barely contained. She dug into her little tote bag and pulled out her drawing, the very heart of their dreams. Look, Dad, I added a reading room for you, and a big kitchen so we can cook real dinners, not noodles. Gavin chuckled, but something tugged behind his ribs. Real dinners, huh? Guess I better learn to cook. She beamed and placed the drawing on the table just as her elbow bumped the water glass. The spill happened fast, a small tidal wave across cheap laminate. The blueprint soaked instantly. Mia gasped. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean. Her voice cracked that little break children get right before tears. Gavin froze. His jaw clenched. A flash of frustration surged sharp ugly. Why tonight? Why this drawing? Why now? But then he saw her tiny hands trembling the way she shrank in the booth, and the anger dissolved as quickly as it came. "It's okay," he said softly, grabbing napkins and gently blotting the paper. "See, it's just water. We'll fix it. Everything's fixable." Mia sniffled. "Really? Really?" He tapped her nose. She giggled, a fragile sound, but real. At the next booth, a woman who'd been quietly eating looked over. She wore a simple sweater, hair loose and tied back, nothing that screamed wealth or power. But there was something in the way she watched, the stillness, the focus. She had noticed everything, and her gaze lingered longest on the blueprint. When the bill came, Gavin slid his card across the counter, praying silently. The machine beeped, a hollow, unforgiving sound. Sir, it's not going through." The waitress whispered it, but whispering didn't help. Mia heard. Of course she heard. She gripped the edge of her seat, worry clouding her little face. Before Gavin could ask the waitress to try again or humiliate himself asking for a moment to figure it out, the quiet woman stepped forward. "I think you're eligible for tonight's small family discount," she said warmly. Before he could speak, she'd already handled it with the cashier, calm, discreet, elegant in a way that didn't demand gratitude. She returned not just with their paid bill, but 2 take-home cups, a strawberry milkshake, and a warm apple pie slice. "For the Gold Star artist," she told Mia. Gavin stammered, "Ma'am, you didn't have to." "It's nothing," she interrupted softly. Then her eyes shifted to the damp blueprint. "May I see it?" Gavin hesitated, but Mia nodded eagerly. The woman studied it with surprising care, her breath catching once ever so slightly. She reached into her pocket and handed Gavin a simple card. Only a name and a line. "Alex, Community Projects. If you ever want to draw something bigger, call me." She left before Gavin could ask anything else. Driving home, the truck rattled gently under their weight. Mia clutched the card the entire way, her fingers tracing the edges. "Dad," she whispered, "if we call her, could our future house really happen?" Gavin didn't answer right away. He looked into the rearview mirror. Mia, half asleep, hugging the water-stained blueprint like a wounded friend. Hope flickered in her eyes, dangerous bright, impossible to protect once lit. He tightened his grip on the wheel. Because deep down he wasn't sure what scared him more, the possibility that this mysterious woman could change everything, or the possibility that she wouldn't. The next few days slipped by with the quiet heaviness of a household trying to stay upright on a crumbling foundation. Every morning began the same way, the creak of Gavin's work boots hitting the floor, the soft shuffle of Mia packing her school things, the low hum of the old refrigerator that was mostly filled with air. Their routine was steady, but beneath it, something was shifting. A tension Gavin tried to hide, a curiosity Mia couldn't name, and a business card, white simple and far too hopeful, hidden in the kitchen drawer like a secret, neither of them was brave enough to touch. Work blurred into repetition. Fix a flickering hallway light. Tighten a pipe in Unit 204. Wipe down a stair railing. Repeat. While he worked, Gavin listened to the familiar chorus of the building, the buzz of old wiring, the groan of water heaters, the uneven heartbeat of the furnace kicking on. These sounds were his life constants that didn't ask him to dream past the next paycheck. But every time he paused at his locker, the blueprint in his pocket called to him. He would unfold it, study the smudged and water-stained edges, and feel a tug deep in his chest. He'd tried to redraw it the night after the diner incident, but his pencils kept hesitating. As if the mistake had been more than spilled water, as if it had washed away a little of his nerve. During lunch break, the maintenance guys invited him again. "Gav, come grab a beer after shift. First round's on me." He smiled, polite but distant. Rain check. Got things to handle at home. They didn't know that things to handle meant checking his wallet twice and pretending the grocery list was shorter than it really was. Or that he'd stood in front of the fridge that morning surveying the near-empty shelves, milk, 3 apples, and a leftover takeout packet from last week. They didn't know that Mia had quietly slipped a few coins into his hand the night before. For the house fund, she whispered proud of her savings jar contribution. Gavin's throat tightened so hard he couldn't speak. He'd only managed to hug her and hope she didn't hear how unsteady his breathing was. That evening, Mia sat at the kitchen table, her small shoulders hunched in deep concentration. The soft strokes of colored pencils filled the room. "What are you working on, Sweet Pea?" Gavin asked, drying his hands on a towel after washing the last dish. She held up her drawing. It was the future house again, only this time she'd added another figure. A woman, drawn with simple lines and a gentle smile, standing beside the two of them. "That's someone new," Gavin murmured. Mia answered simply, "It's Miss Alex. She was nice." Her voice was matter-of-fact innocent. But the picture hit Gavin like a quiet blow. A stranger sketched into their future. A stranger with resources he could never touch. He swallowed, tucking away a wave of embarrassment he didn't want his daughter to see. "Dad," Mia said suddenly, "do you think she meant what she said? About drawing bigger things?" Gavin didn't respond. Instead, he walked to the drawer, cracked it open, and looked at the card lying inside. Alex. Community projects. He ran a thumb over the embossed letters, then shut the drawer again. Later, after Mia brushed her teeth and climbed into bed, Gavin lingered in the hallway listening to her soft breathing fade into sleep. He stepped quietly into the kitchen, turning on only the stove light. Its warm hum filled the room. On the counter sat the eviction notice, still unopened but undeniably present. He pressed his palms against the edge of the sink, wrestling with the voice in his head. She was just being polite. "You'd embarrass yourself if you called. She's from a different world. People like her don't actually help men like you." But another thought crept in, quieter, gentler, stubborn. What if? His hand moved before his confidence did. He reached for the phone. Across the city, Alexandra Vale sat in a private conference room, shoulders slumped in a way the public never saw. Papers were scattered across the table. Financial reports, redevelopment proposals, and thick folders stamped Vale Group. She rubbed her temples, replaying the heated argument she'd just had with CFO Victor Lang about maximizing returns and not wasting resources on community fantasies. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost ignored it. But something nudged her to answer. Her voice softened when she heard his. "Gavin." There was a long pause on his end. Then finally, "You still need ideas for that, small project you mentioned?" Her smile unfolded slowly, quiet but real. "Yes," she said. "Very much." Her tone brightened, though exhaustion still pulled at her words. "I'd like to meet you at a location tomorrow. It's a vacant building. I want your take on it. Nothing fancy. Just your honest eye." Gavin hesitated again. "You're sure I don't want to waste your time?" "You won't," she replied gently. He didn't know how much she meant that. After he hung up, Gavin set the phone on the counter. The room felt different, wider somehow, as if hope took up space. Just then, small footsteps padded in. "Dad." "Who were you talking to?" Mia stood there, hair messy from sleep, clutching her stuffed rabbit. Gavin glanced at the eviction notice, then at the drawer where the business card lay, then at his daughter, whose eyes held that same fragile hope from the diner. He crouched beside her. "We're visiting a new place tomorrow," he whispered. "Maybe the start of something good?" "I don't know yet." She lay her head on his shoulder. "Is it for our future house?" He didn't answer right away. The truth was, he wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, so he kept it simple. "We'll find out together, kiddo." Narration wrapped around the moment, soft and foreboding. He didn't yet know that the place they'd visit was the very heartbeat of a world he'd never dared to enter and the center of a storm already building around them. The next morning broke with a hush. No sirens, no neighbors arguing, Just the soft thump of Gavin setting his work boots by the door and the faint rustle of Mia zipping up her jacket. She was practically vibrating with excitement, her breath puffing out fast little clouds as they stepped onto the sidewalk. "Dad is the building. Far, not too far," Gavin said, though his voice carried a tension he couldn't hide. This wasn't just a visit. It felt like being pulled toward a crossroads he hadn't agreed to stand at. The new place, as Alexandra had called it, sat in the middle of a long-forgotten industrial block. A chain-link fence leaned half-collapsed. The walls were scarred by decades of weather-flaking paint, warped panels, graffiti layered like old bruises. It looked like a place the world had given up on. But when the wind pushed across the open yard, something unexpected happened. The hollow hallways caught the sound, turning it into a low, echoing hum. Mia's eyes widened. "It sounds like singing." Gavin listened. She wasn't wrong. The building had a voice. Before he could answer, footfalls echoed behind them, measured, steady, confident. Alexandra approached dressed simply again, jeans a gray tee, her hair tied back. She looked nothing like a billionaire CEO, but everything like someone who'd made a promise and come to keep it. "Good morning," she greeted, slightly out of breath. Traffic was a nightmare, but her smile, warm and unguarded, was the opposite of polished corporate grace. Mia waved shyly. "Hi, Miss Alex. Hi, sweetheart," Alexandra said, bending a little so they were eye level. Ready to explore. Inside the building felt like stepping into a memory someone forgot to finish. Dust settled in sunbeams like drifting snow. Old posters peeled from the walls. The floor groaned under their footsteps. But something about the wide-open rooms, the high ceilings, the empty courtyard visible through broken windows. It wasn't just potential. It felt like a story still waiting for its middle. Alexandra spoke quietly, her voice carrying a fragile sort of hope. "I want this place to be a community center, a real one. Not just a charity photo op. A place where kids can learn, where families can breathe again. A place that belongs to people like—" She paused, catching herself. "To people who need it." Gavin crouched to examine a cracked support beam. He tapped it, listening to the dull vibration. His mind, rusty from years of disuse, began to hum in ways he hadn't felt since he was 18. He looked around the space like he was seeing past the brokenness. That corner could hold natural light if the wall gets reinforced. And the courtyard, you could turn it into a play area or a reading patio. He didn't realize he was speaking aloud until Alexandra smiled. "You hear buildings, don't you?" she asked softly. He blinked. "I don't know about that." "I do," she whispered. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. As Gavin walked the perimeter, Alexandra stayed quiet, watching him not with judgment, but with recognition. The way he touched the window frame. The way he stepped into the sunlight to gauge its angle. The way he sketched invisible lines with his index finger, his mind racing ahead of his body. It reminded her of her childhood, the soft scratch of her father's pencil on thick blueprint paper, the way he'd lean over her shoulder and whisper, "See the shape of what's possible." Alex, not the shape of what's broken. She slipped a small worn piece of blueprint from her bag, a torn fragment she'd carried for years. Her father's handwriting looped gracefully along one edge. She held it next to Gavin's rough draft from the diner, which she'd printed and brought with her. The resemblance was uncanny, two separate hands dreaming the same sort of future. That night, after Mia fell asleep on the old couch with her crayons scattered everywhere, Gavin sat at the kitchen table with a sharp pencil and a fresh sheet of graph paper. The apartment was quiet except for the ticking clock and the low hum of the streetlight outside. He drew the building's outline, then erased it, then drew it again. Mia stirred awake long enough to shuffle over and plop beside him. "What are you doing?" she murmured, sleepy but curious. "Just sketching. For the center, maybe." She laid her head against his arm and colored absent-mindedly, humming. The soft rhythm of her pencil strokes steadied him. He kept drawing. Walls, windows, a courtyard, a library, a room for after-school programs, a place that felt kind. Then, without warning, old memories surged up a hospital room. Medical bills stacked high, his architecture textbooks abandoned in a cardboard box. The trembling decision to give up school so he could hold his wife's hand without leaving her alone. The pencil faltered. He inhaled sharply, pushing through the ache, because the truth was designing this center wasn't just reviving a dream, it was reopening an old wound. Still, he didn't stop drawing. Meanwhile, miles away in a high-rise where the night air tasted like cold marble and recycled air, Alexandra sat alone in her office. The city glowed outside her window, but she wasn't looking at it. She stared at Gavin's emailed sketches on her laptop, zooming in on every detail. Her breath hitched. "If my father could see this," she whispered. The room felt smaller, suddenly memories pressing in. Her father's laugh, his rough hands guiding hers along a ruler. His dream of building a community center canceled the year before he died, replaced by a luxury complex. Her fingers shook slightly as she traced the edge of the screen. That's when the office door clicked. Victor Lang stepped in, voice slicing through her thoughts. "Working late again, Alexandra. Let me guess this is about the low-yield redevelopment block." She minimized the sketches instinctively, but not fast enough. Victor's eyes narrowed. "Don't tell me you're wasting more time on that sentimental nonsense." He picked up a folder, flipping through it with cold efficiency. "We both know the condo plan is the only option that keeps investors happy." Alexandra didn't argue. Not yet. She simply closed the laptop gently, hiding the tremble in her hands. Because what Victor didn't know, what he couldn't possibly understand, was that the sketches she'd seen tonight weren't just good. They were alive, and she wasn't about to let the world break another dream worth saving. By the next morning, the city felt like it had put on its usual armor, traffic humming office towers waking up with the soft thrum of elevators, and the low murmur of employees streaming in with coffee cups and tired greetings. But on the top floor of Vale Group headquarters, the atmosphere was anything but ordinary. The boardroom was already packed by the time Alexandra stepped in. She could hear the static crackle of a large screen warming up the shuffle of papers, the impatient tapping of pens against polished wood. Victor stood at the front, immaculate as always, with a stack of binders that looked designed less for clarity and more for intimidation. He wasted no time. "Let's get started," Victor announced, clicking to a slide filled with tightly packed data. "Here is the updated ROI projection for the redevelopment of Block C17. There it was, the building Gavin lived in, reduced to a label with a hyphen and a code. Victor continued, his tone clipped and clinical. "This area currently generates minimal revenue. After demolition and condo development, we estimate a 26% return within 18 months. Higher if we expand retail frontage." Around the table, heads nodded. Pens scribbled. Not a single face showed hesitation. Alexandra sat straighter, trying to keep her voice calm. "And what about long-term community impact? What about the families who live there?" Victor didn't even turn to look at her. "They're already being relocated. The notices have gone out." The words hit her like a punch because she knew exactly who one of those families was. A lump formed in her throat, but she forced her voice steady. "I want the board to consider an alternative proposal. A community center. One that could serve low-income parents, offer education support after school programs," Victor cut in sharply. Based on sketches from a janitor, Alexandra stiffened, heat rising under her skin. He is not just a janitor. He has design training. And, more importantly, he understands the community better than any of us. Victor tapped his pen, unimpressed. "We can't run this company on sentiment. His ideas may look poetic on paper, but they do not justify losing millions." Her jaw tightened. It's not sentiment, it's impact, branding, responsibility. But even as she spoke, she could sense the board's discomfort. They weren't used to hearing compassion in the same sentence as profit. Meanwhile, far from the towering glass building, Gavin's day was unfolding with the familiar, weary rhythm he knew too well. He patched a broken pipe in the basement, the metallic clang echoing around him. He wiped fingerprints off a lobby door. He replaced 2 more blown-out bulbs. Every task felt heavier than usual, because now he wasn't just maintaining a building. He was trying to keep from losing it. During a short break, he checked his phone not for messages from Alexandra, though he wouldn't admit he hoped for one, but to look again at the blueprint he'd stayed up half the night fixing. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even polished. But it felt alive. Mia's voice pulled him back to reality as she skipped out of her room that evening, waving her latest drawing, another version of the dream house, this one with a tiny swing set on the side. She showed it proudly to the old neighbor, Mrs. Whitaker, who chuckled softly. If your dad had stayed in school, sweetheart, he'd be designing houses like this for real. Gavin's stomach dipped. He didn't want his daughter to grow up knowing how much he'd given up, or believing he'd failed. Later that night, Alexandra knocked on his door. Not as a CEO, not as a billionaire, just as a woman who believed in something she couldn't fully explain yet. Gavin blinked in surprise when he opened the door. "You came here. I needed to see the sketches in person," she said quietly. "And I wanted to check on you two." The apartment was small, humble-worn, lived in. She removed her shoes without him asking, instinctively respectful. The floor gave a little under her step, but she didn't flinch. Mia rushed forward with a grin. "Miss Alex, we made noodles?" Alexandra laughed softly. Noodles sound perfect. And just like that, she was sitting cross-legged on the old carpet, balancing a plastic bowl in her hands. She didn't complain about the creaky chair Mia offered or the mismatched utensils. Instead, she ate as though she belonged there. Gavin watched her thrown off balance by how natural she looked in this place that had always felt too small for anyone outside their world. After dinner, Alexandra leaned over the table, poring over his drawings. Her voice lowered. "Gavin. These are good, really good." He didn't lift his eyes. "I'm rusty." "You're talented," she corrected gently. He studied her for a moment, unsure how to accept praise from someone who lived in penthouses and negotiated billion-dollar deals. Someone whose father's blueprint folded in her wallet was beginning to connect strangely with his own. But elsewhere in the city, another scene was unfolding, one that neither of them knew would change everything. In a sleek office, Victor signed a stack of documents with a decisive flick of his pen. The copier hummed as it processed formal notices, each page stamped with the bright red seal of property reclamation. "Emotion can't interfere with business," he murmured. He didn't say the rest aloud, "and I won't let her ruin years of strategy because she feels sorry for one janitor and his child." He sent the documents off. A machine beeped cold mechanical final. The eviction for Gavin's building was now active. Back in the small apartment, Gavin and Alexandra shared a moment of calm laughing when Mia insisted on showing Alexandra the reading corner she'd designed out of pillows. Gavin glanced at Alexandra as the girl talked. For a second, he saw something fragile in her expression, something like longing or recognition. He wondered what demons she carried. He wondered why someone like her kept stepping into someone like him. But the warmth of that moment was already shifting, because while they were laughing in the glow of a cheap lamp, a courier was delivering envelopes to dozens of tenants, including one addressed to Gavin Holt. Alexandra didn't know. Gavin didn't know. But Victor had already set the next crisis in motion. The next morning carried a strange quiet, one of those silences that settles over a neighborhood right before something shifts. Gavin didn't recognize it, not yet. He only knew he felt heavier, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He dropped Mia off at school with a kiss to her forehead and a reminder to eat her apple at lunch. She waved, cheerful and bright, unaware of the storm circling their lives. Gavin headed across town for an extra maintenance shift. He'd picked up one that paid just enough to cover groceries for the week. The building was a sleek glass tower in the financial district, the kind where the lobby smelled like polished stone and lavender cleaning spray, and every footstep echoed in a way that reminded you this was not your world. He signed in at the security desk, his name scribbled onto a visitor's badge labeled in bold letters, Maintenance. Temp access only. The guard looked him up and down with mild boredom. Electrical issue on the top floor. On. Try not to get in anyone's way, they've got some big meeting up there today. Gavin nodded, gripping his tool bag a little tighter. He'd gotten used to being invisible, but something in the guard's tone stung more than he expected. He rode the elevator up. The soft ding at each floor sounded like a countdown. When the doors opened, Gavin stepped into a hallway carpeted in thick gray plush, the kind that muffled every sound. But the conference room at the end was wide open, and from inside he could hear everything. Microphones clicking on, chairs scraping, a dozen voices speaking in clipped, polished tones. He approached the light fixture that needed repair. It hung above the glass wall of the boardroom, its flicker reflecting faintly in the room beyond. He set up his ladder, climbing a few steps, the room below coming into sharp view through the glass. And that was when he saw her, Alexandra. Not the woman in jeans who ate noodles on his carpet, or the person who knelt beside Mia and listened like no adult ever had. This was CEO Alexandra Vale, her back straight, her suit immaculate, her voice precise and steady as she addressed a room full of people who held more wealth than he'd see in 5 lifetimes. Gavin's breath hitched. She looked unreachable. A woman built of steel and expectation. He'd known she came from money, but seeing her like this commanding a boardroom high above the city was something else entirely. He watched as Victor stood flipping through a series of slides filled with numbers and phrases that meant nothing to him. Demolition of low-yield properties, Victor announced. Prioritizing high-return condo development. Block C-17 has already received eviction notices, and Gavin's grip on the ladder faltered. Block C-17. His building. His home. He nearly lost his balance. The bulb in his hand slid dangerously and he clutched it tight before it could shatter. He swallowed hard, forcing himself to breathe. He listened as Victor continued. Relocation incentives have been processed. Tenants will be moved out within weeks. The words rang in Gavin's ears like a sentence. Alexandra spoke next, cutting through Victor's monologue. Her tone was firm but edged with resistance. We haven't finalized whether demolition is the best long-term solution. Victor countered smoothly. It's the most profitable. Community projects don't move the needle, Alexandra. Especially not when based on sketches from a maintenance worker. Laughter rippled lightly across the room, polite, cold, dismissive. Gavin froze. Was that him? Victor was talking about. He looked down at his hands, at the dirt under his nails, the faint smell of industrial soap clinging to his shirt, the fraying seam at his collar. Maintenance worker. Nobody. Of course, that was all they saw. Alexandra inhaled sharply, ready to argue, but Victor kept going, relentless. We cannot gamble the company's future on charity. The board murmured in agreement. Alexandra's jaw flexed. It's not charity. It's sentiment, Victor snapped. Gavin watched as her shoulders stiffened, watched the effort it took her to steady her breathing. She looked alone in that room. Even with all her power, she stood isolated against the tide. He didn't know why that hurt him. Maybe because he'd seen another side of her, the one who knelt on creaky apartment floors and listened, truly listened to his daughter. But none of that mattered here. Here she was, someone else entirely. He felt foolish for thinking he'd understood her at all. He looked away, blinking hard, adjusting the wiring with shaking hands. When he caught his reflection faintly in the glass, he barely recognized the man staring back. He tightened the last screw and climbed down quickly, his heart pounding with humiliation he couldn't shake. As he packed up his tools, he felt the weight of worlds he didn't belong to pressing on him. He didn't glance back at the boardroom again. But just as he turned to leave, Alexandra's gaze flicked toward the door toward him. For one fleeting second, their eyes almost met. Almost. He turned away before she could see the hurt on his face. By the time he reached home that evening, something inside him had broken loose, quietly, silently, dangerously. He put his tool bag down with more force than necessary. He didn't turn on the lights. Mia peeked out from her room clutching a drawing. "Bah, you okay?" He managed a tight smile. "Just tired, kiddo." When she returned to her room, he opened the kitchen drawer, the one where Alex's simple white card still lay. He picked it up, ran his thumb across the letters, then tossed it into the trash can with a hard final flick. The sound it made hitting the bottom paper against plastic echoed through the kitchen like a door slamming shut. He grabbed the eviction notice next. For a moment he stared at it, anger swelling hot behind his sternum. Then he crumpled it and threw it in after the card. He whispered into the empty room the words, tasting bitter. "I was stupid to believe someone like her could ever understand someone like me." Narration settled like a shadow. This time, he wasn't just giving up on a project. He was giving up on the last soft corner of his heart, the one that had dared, if only for a moment, to trust again. The days that followed felt strangely hollow, as if someone had turned down the volume on Gavin's world. He moved through each morning with the same tired rhythm boots on, jacket-zipped lunch packed for Mia, but inside, everything was muted. He hadn't told her what he'd heard in the boardroom. He couldn't bring himself to say the words out loud, so instead he just shut down. And Alexandra felt it immediately. She called the next morning at 8:14. He let it ring until it stopped. She called again at lunch. He silenced the phone and shoved it into his pocket. By the third call, she switched to text. "Gavin, are you all right? We need to meet about the updated sketches. Did something happen? Please call me." He typed a reply 3 times, deleted it 3 times. Finally, he sent one short message. "I can't continue. Thank you for everything." Then he turned off his phone and went back to plunging a clogged drain in apartment 1B, letting the metallic echoes drown out the ache in his chest. Alexandra stared at his message like it was written in a language she couldn't understand. She replayed their last moments in his apartment, the noodles, the laughter, Mia's bright drawings taped to the wall. She had felt something shift that night, something warm and frighteningly human. She thought, maybe he felt it too. But now, silence. She emailed. No reply. She called again. Voicemail. She tried one last time and heard his voice calm, tired, recorded long ago. "You've reached Gavin. Leave a message." She swallowed, steadying herself before speaking. "Gavin, I don't know what happened, but please talk to me. If I made a mistake, let me fix it. Just don't disappear like this." Her voice cracked just barely, but the phone didn't care. It simply hung up on her in a soft click. At home, Mia noticed everything. She noticed that the blueprint once proudly displayed on the wall now lay tucked behind a stack of old bills. She noticed that her father no longer talked about the community center. She noticed the way he stared at the eviction notice, thinking he was being quiet. One evening, she found him sitting at the kitchen table, hands pressed over his face, the room dim except for the glow of the streetlight outside. "Bah," she whispered. He straightened, quickly wiping his eyes. "Hey, kiddo. Thought you were asleep." "I woke up thirsty," she said, though her real thirst was for answers. She tilted her head. "Are you mad at Miss Alex?" He froze. "What makes you say that?" "You threw her card away." Her voice wasn't accusing, just small and sad. Gavin swallowed hard. "Mia. Things are complicated." She sat beside him, swinging her legs. "Did she do something bad?" He remembered the boardroom, the laughter, the word janitor used like an insult, the decision to demolish his home, her silence in that moment. He exhaled sharply. "I just think, maybe I believed something that wasn't real." Mia lowered her gaze, tracing a circle on the table. "Do you still like drawing our future house?" He didn't know how to answer. His silence spoke for him. She nodded softly and slipped off her chair. Okay, she whispered, walking back to her room. A few minutes later, Gavin peeked in to check on her. She was sitting on the floor with her drawing. Only this time the little house had dark clouds scribbled above it. Raindrops fell across the windows. And in the corner, a shaky sentence written in clumsy 7-year-old letters, "If we don't have a house anymore, are we still a family?" His breath caught. He knelt beside her. "Mia." "Sweetheart." He pulled her into his arms, her small body trembling. "Of course we're a family. No building can change that. But why are we losing our home?" she whispered into his shirt. He closed his eyes. There was no easy answer. No gentle way to explain systems built to overlook people like them. So he simply held her until her breathing steadied, held her until his own heart stopped shaking. Across the city, Alexandra was fighting her own storm. Victor had just left her office after another brutal exchange. "Our shareholders will not tolerate delays," he warned. "If you keep pushing this community center fantasy, you risk more than your reputation." She stared him down. "And what exactly am I risking?" "Victor, your position," he said calmly. "Your authority, and perhaps most importantly, your father's legacy. Don't forget his name built this empire. Do you really want to tear it down for the sake of one run-down block?" She flinched, and Victor saw it. He pressed on. "You're letting that man cloud your judgment." Alexandra's eyes snapped up. "Don't talk about him." But Victor only smirked faintly and left the room. She sat alone, breathing hard, staring at the old blueprint in her hand. Her father's dream. Gavin's dream. Her dream. They aligned too perfectly for coincidence. She clicked open a digital file from the redevelopment department and froze at a line she hadn't noticed before. Eviction order block C17. Tenants must vacate within 30 days. Her blood ran cold. "If that's where he lives," she whispered, because the address was the same. The same building she'd walked through with him, the same hallway where Mia's drawings hung on the doors. Victor hadn't just dismissed her project. He had weaponized it. Her chair scraped loudly as she stood grabbing her coat with shaking hands. She didn't wait for the elevator. She took the stairs, her footsteps echoing like a heartbeat gone wild. Down each floor. Faster. Faster. She needed to see it with her own eyes. She needed to see him. Now. The glass doors of the building swung open, the night air cold against her skin. She whispered to herself, "I prayed I was wrong. Please, let me be wrong." But she already knew the truth. What she didn't know was how he would look at her when she told him. The night rain had started without warning. Thin at first, then steadier, building into a quiet curtain over the city. It tapped against rusted gutters and echoed down narrow alleyways following Alexandra Vale as she hurried through Gavin's neighborhood with a sense of urgency that bordered on fear. She didn't bring her driver. She didn't bring an umbrella. She didn't bring the armor of power she wore so easily in boardrooms. Just a coat, a set of car keys, and the terrible possibility that she had helped ruin the life of the only man who had looked at her without seeing dollar signs or headlines. Her footsteps echoed along the dim hallway of Gavin's building, the cheap overhead light flickering the scent of old carpet and damp plaster heavy in the air. This was a place she never should have allowed her company to touch. She reached his door and knocked, heart-pounding. For a moment, nothing. Then the lock clicked and the door opened just enough for Gavin to appear. He froze. She froze. He looked, exhausted, eyes shadowed, jaw tense, shoulders set as if bracing for a blow. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair slightly damp from earlier errands. But what struck her hardest wasn't his appearance. It was the expression. Closed. Guarded. Wounded. "Alexandra," he said, voice tight. "What are you doing here, Gavin?" She stepped forward on instinct, but he didn't budge from the doorway, forcing her to stay in the hall. Rain dripped from her coat to the carpet. He noticed, but didn't invite her in. She swallowed, steadying her breath. "I saw the eviction order. Your address matched the redevelopment block. I didn't know it was your home. I swear to you I didn't. and I came here to— To what? He interrupted quietly. Fix it. His tone wasn't angry. It was worse. It was tired. Gavin, please, let me explain. You don't owe me anything, he said, jaw rigid, and I don't owe you an explanation for not returning your calls. She flinched. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't accusing. He was just done. But she wasn't. Gavin, she whispered, why did you shut me out? He finally looked at her fully, and the pain behind his eyes cut deep. You want honesty, he murmured. Fine. He stepped into the hallway, letting the door fall mostly shut behind him. The light above them buzzed softly like it was listening. I saw you, he said. In the boardroom? Her breath hitched. I was fixing a light fixture on the other side of the glass. I heard every word. His voice grew rough. He called me a janitor like I was dirt on a shoe. He talked about demolishing low-yield assets as if families weren't living inside them, as if my kid wasn't sleeping there at night. Alexandra's eyes stung. Gavin. I tried to push back, but you didn't stop it, he said quietly. Not then. And now it's too late. It's not too late. It feels like it. Silence settled between them, heavy, suffocating. She stepped closer. Gavin, you have no idea how hard I am fighting behind the scenes. His laugh was humorless. You don't have to fight for me. I'm not just fighting for you, she said. I'm fighting because what's happening is wrong. He looked away, jaw tightening again. For a moment, her voice softened, almost breaking. I'm sorry, she said. I'm so sorry you felt humiliated. And I'm sorry you thought I didn't care. He blinked, startled by the honest vulnerability in her tone. But she wasn't done. I didn't know the eviction was tied to that block, she continued. I didn't know it was your home. And I will not let them tear it down without a fight. I've already frozen the demolition plans. Temporarily. He stared at her. What does temporarily mean? It means I have a board meeting tomorrow, she said, voice steadying with resolve. A high-stakes one. I'm going to propose we switch the demolition project into a community center redevelopment. I'm going to show them your sketches. And I'm going to argue until I don't have breath left. Gavin shook his head, overwhelmed. That's your job on the line. I know. That's millions of dollars. I know. That's your father's company. Her voice cracked. I know that, too. He rubbed his face with a hand, processing all of it. Alexandra. Why would you risk everything? Her answer was soft and honest. Because the night you let me sit on your floor and eat noodles with you and Mia was the first time in years I felt human instead of a brand, a title, a position. Because when you draw, you build the kind of world I've spent my whole life wishing existed. Because I can't sit behind a boardroom table pretending I don't see the people my decisions hurt. She paused, then added so quietly he almost didn't hear. And because I can't look at you or your daughter and pretend you're just another name on a file. His breath caught. She swallowed hard. If I lose my position tomorrow, if they strip me of everything, would you still keep drawing with me? The hallway fell silent. The dripping coat, the buzzing light, the soft thunder outside, all of it faded into the background. Gavin didn't answer right away, because there were 100 emotions tangled in his chest: fear, awe, confusion, anger, longing. He finally whispered, I don't want you ruining your life because of me. She stepped closer. I'm not ruining it, she murmured. I'm reclaiming it. His throat tightened. He didn't know how to process the way she looked at him, like he mattered, like he was worth fighting for. For a moment, neither moved. Then Mia's sleepy voice drifted from inside the apartment. Bah. Who's out there? Gavin gently placed a hand on the door. I should go. Alexandra nodded slowly. But just before she turned to leave, she looked over her shoulder and whispered, Wish me luck tomorrow. The door closed softly behind him, and Alexandra walked down the dim hallway alone, rain hitting the windows, her heart beating too fast, knowing tomorrow might destroy everything she had built, or save something she'd never realized she needed. The morning arrived too quickly. Before the sun had fully risen, Gavin was already tying Mia's shoelaces, listening to the quiet scrape of her chair against the floor as she swung her legs. She chattered sleepily about a class project, but his thoughts drifted again and again to what Alexandra had said the night before. "If I lose my position tomorrow, would you still keep drawing with me?" He heard it every time he blinked, her voice raw and vulnerable in the dim hallway. And behind that, the echo of Victor's cold words, "Tenants will be moved out within weeks." He kept those two truths inside him like clashing weather systems, hope and fear fighting for space. After dropping Mia off, he lingered in the school parking lot, gripping the steering wheel. He wanted to call Alexandra, to ask if she was all right, to say he believed in her, to apologize for shutting her out. But what could he say to a woman walking into a boardroom that might very well swallow her whole? Nothing, he said, could help her now. So he whispered to the empty truck, "Good luck." Alex then drove away. Across the city, Alexandra stepped out of the elevator onto the top floor of Vale Group headquarters. Every sound felt sharper: the click of her heels, the hum of the air vents, the rustle of her blazer as she adjusted it. She'd barely slept, but her resolve was carved into her bones. Her assistant met her outside the boardroom. Everything's set up. They're waiting. And Victor's in a mood. "Great," she murmured, exhaling once before stepping inside. The door closed behind her. The boardroom felt colder than usual. Sleek table silver carafes of untouched coffee and 12 pairs of eyes tracking her every move. Screens behind Victor displayed graphs and projections. "Let's begin," Victor said, not bothering to hide his irritation. The numbers show. Alexandra lifted a hand. "Before we discuss numbers, I have a counter-proposal." That earned murmurs. People shifted in their seats. Victor didn't hide his disdain. A counter-proposal to a redevelopment strategy already approved by the Finance Committee. "Yes," she said calmly, "and one I believe will serve this company and this city far better than the demolition plan." She clicked a remote. The screen changed. Gavin's sketches appeared clean, thoughtful, deeply human lines. A courtyard for families, a reading room with natural light, spaces intentionally designed for people who rarely had anything designed for them. The room fell silent. "This," she continued, circling the table, "is the community center concept I propose we pursue instead of condos." Victor barked a dry laugh, based on the drawings of a maintenance worker. Her gaze snapped to him sharp as glass. Based on the drawings of a man with architectural training, real community insight, and more heart than anyone I've met in this building. She turned back to the board. "For years, we've built towers for people who already have everything. But Block C-17 is full of families who've been overlooked, families who deserve more than a relocation notice." She spoke steadily, her voice gaining strength with each breath. "If we turn that building into a community haven, mixed-use, multifunctional, accessible, we won't just make a profit. We'll rebuild trust and redefine what this company stands for." She clicked to the next slide, projected cost-benefit analysis she'd stayed up all night preparing. Long-term brand value, partnership potential, education grants, city incentives. This plan does not hemorrhage money. It invests it. And the return will come not in quick cash, but in loyalty, reputation, and generational impact. The room shifted the first sign she'd cracked their shell. Victor saw it too and struck. "If you want to donate to charity, Alexandra, do it with your personal funds. Don't saddle this company with your savior complex." Her expression hardened. She stepped closer to him. "Fine," she said quietly. "Then I will." Whispers exploded around the table. "I'm sorry," Victor said, startled. "I'll use my personal assets to buy out the redevelopment project," Alexandra repeated. "Every liability, every risk." She placed both palms on the table. "If Vale Group wants to walk away, then walk. I will not." For a moment, even the air seemed to freeze. Victor sputtered, "You're risking your entire fortune, your position as CEO, because of one sentimental passion project." "No," she answered softly. "Because of what's right." She looked around the room, the men and women who had judged her since she'd taken her father's place. "If our company can't survive doing the right thing, then it doesn't deserve to exist as he built it." The board members exchanged glances. Someone whispered, "Maybe she has a point." Another murmured long-term PR value. She might be onto something. Victor realized he was losing ground. "We're voting," he snapped. And they did, one by one. The tension was suffocating. Finally, the decision was recorded. A narrow majority approved Alexandra's plan, but only under two conditions. 1. She would personally shoulder part of the financial risk. 2. Victor would maintain oversight to ensure responsible spending. She didn't care. Victory was victory. The meeting adjourned. The door closed, and only then, only when she was alone in the hallway, did she finally let her body sag against the wall, breath shaking out of her in a long, unsteady sigh. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She almost ignored it. Then she saw the name on the screen. Gavin Holt. Her heart thudded once so hard it hurt. Hands trembling, she answered. "Gavin." She breathed. For a moment, he didn't speak. She could hear background noise, maybe wind, maybe the faint chatter of people passing by. Then his voice came low and rough, but gentler than she expected. "I heard your board meeting was today." "Yes. Are you okay?" No one had asked her that all morning. Not one person. Her voice softened. I think so." Another pause. Then Alexandra Gavin said quietly, "Why did you do all that?" She felt her throat tighten. "Because some things are worth fighting for." A long silence. Then she heard him exhale, slow, shaky, full of 100 emotions she couldn't name yet. "Okay," he whispered. Then, "Let's talk." Her knees nearly gave out, because for the first time since yesterday morning she heard hope in his voice. The call between them didn't last long, maybe 2 minutes, maybe less. But when Gavin hung up, the apartment felt different, as if someone had cracked a window in a room that had been sealed too long. The air moved again. Possibility moved again. He stared at the phone for a moment, rubbing the back of his neck. Then he exhaled, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the door. Today. He needed answers. And Alexandra said she'd give them. The lobby of Vale Group headquarters felt like another planet. Gavin had been here before, but only through the service entrance, taking the freight elevator with mop carts and broken light bulbs. This time he walked through the front doors. His boots clicked against polished stone. The marble gleamed. A waterfall wall whispered somewhere nearby, soft and expensive. People in tailored suits glanced at him, curious but not unkind, just unsure of why a man with calloused hands and a worn jacket had stepped into their world. Mia walked beside him, chin lifted proudly, her hand tiny in his. She whispered, "Bah. This place is like a giant museum." "Feels like it," he murmured. Alexandra was waiting at the top of the grand staircase. No blazer, no icy CEO expression. Just her hair loosely pinned back binder tucked under her arm, looking a little nervous and a little relieved. When she saw them, something unguarded crossed her face. "Hi," she said softly. It was simple, but it carried "Thank you, I missed you, and I'm glad you came all at once." Gavin swallowed. "Hi." They walked toward each other. Slowly, carefully, like people who'd been hurt but weren't ready to give up. Mia ran ahead. Miss Alexandra knelt to hug her, laughing in a way that startled even herself. "I've been waiting for you two." Gavin cleared his throat. "So, the meeting. You're really okay." She straightened, lifting her chin with quiet pride. "Yes, and the project is approved, with conditions." "But approved?" He studied her face, gentle exhaustion beneath determination. "You risked a lot." "I know. A small smile. And if I had to, I'd do it again. He didn't know how to answer that. The truth sat too close to his heart. So Alexandra shifted the subject and motioned toward a glass-walled conference room. "Come on," she said. "There's someone I want you to meet." Inside, a small team waited architects, designers, consultants. But they didn't look skeptical or dismissive. The older gentleman at the head of the table, a structural engineer with silver hair and a rumpled shirt, stood up first and extended his hand. "You're Gavin Holt," he said warmly. "The guy behind those drawings?" Gavin blinked. Yeah, that's me. I've seen your work. Looks solid." The man smiled. "Looks like an architect to me." Gavin almost laughed, almost said, "No, I'm not. I dropped out my life, went sideways." But the words lodged in his throat. Because maybe, just maybe today wasn't about who he used to be. Maybe it was about who he could still become. Alexandra gestured toward the table. "We'd like you to walk everyone through your vision." "My vision." She nodded. "You know that building better than anyone. You understand its bones, its story." And in her eyes he saw something steady, something unwavering. Belief. His chest tightened. He set down his backpack, pulled out the sketches, and began. At first, his voice trembled, but as he traced the layouts with his finger explaining the flow of light, the open courtyard concept, the way families could use the reading room or the playground, something inside him unlocked. The room listened. Alexandra listened the most. He talked about children needing safe places after school. He talked about elders who sat alone in their apartments needing community. He talked about building dignity, not just buildings. By the time he finished, the team wasn't just nodding along, they were smiling, energized. One architect said, "We can work with this." Another murmured, "This is exactly the kind of story we want behind a project like this." Even Victor, watching from the doorway with arms crossed, finally spoke. "We'll keep a close eye on the budget," he said. "But it's workable." It was the closest thing to praise Victor Lang had ever given. Alexandra turned to Gavin with a look that said, "I told you." And for the first time since he'd met her, he didn't pull away from that faith. Hours later, after the meeting and the introductions and the whirlwind of planning, Gavin walked out of the building with Mia skipping ahead. He exhaled slowly. His mind buzzed. His heart buzzed louder. He wasn't sure what the title meant, lead community designer. He wasn't sure why Alexandra had introduced him that way. He didn't feel like he deserved it, but he wanted to. And wanting that was something new. At home, he pinned a new blueprint draft on the wall. Clean lines, real possibilities. A beginning. Mia studied it for a long moment, then turned to him. "Bah, yeah, sweetheart. If our house gets bigger someday..." "Can I name one of the rooms after Miss Alex?" Gavin froze. The question was innocent and massive at the same time. He pictured Alexandra the night she stood in the rain outside his door, shaking, apologizing, fighting for him in ways no one ever had. He pictured her today in the boardroom, powerful but still human, still fragile, risking everything for something she believed in. He smiled softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from Mia's forehead. "We'll see," he said quietly. "Maybe." But his voice carried something he didn't say out loud. "Maybe she already has a place here, whether I'm ready to admit it or not." He turned off the light. Mia climbed into bed. The blueprint on the wall glowed faintly in the dark like a promise. And for the first time in a long time, Gavin felt the shape of the future shift not just for him, not just for Mia, but for something he and Alexandra hadn't dared name yet. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened. And Gavin felt every moment of it. Each day brought new sounds that slowly rewrote the identity of the once-forgotten block. The clack of hammers shaping wooden frames, the whir of drills cutting into metal studs, the rhythmic thump of construction boots marching across concrete, the rising hum of voices, workers, residents, children peeking through fences. It was chaos. Beautiful, necessary chaos. And Gavin Holt stood in the middle of it every day, blueprints rolled under his arm pencil tucked behind his ear, listening to the building as if it were telling him exactly what it needed, because he had learned long ago that broken things don't stay silent. They whisper. The courtyard was the first place to bloom. Not with flowers, those would come later, but with people. Mothers pushing strollers paused to watch. Teenagers leaned against scaffolding offering opinions no one asked for, but somehow mattered. Retired veterans from the block brought folding chairs claiming their unofficial supervisor seats. One afternoon, an elderly man with a walker pointed to a narrow corner of the unfinished courtyard. "Son, you make this a bench right here. This where the sun hits best at 4 p.m. Been sitting here 40 years. Don't mess it up." Gavin smiled. "Yes, sir. Bench stays." Two younger workers overheard. "You just letting people redesign your design?" "Holt," he shrugged. "It's their place. I'm just helping it breathe again." From a few steps away, Alexandra watched the interaction, a soft warmth spreading across her chest. She'd never seen a construction site so human. She approached him later with a hard hat tilted slightly crooked on her head. "You know," she teased gently, "most designers don't let random residents dictate their plans." Gavin smirked. Most designers didn't grow up counting every inch of sunlight to stay warm. Her smile faded into something gentler, something that stayed. As weeks passed, Alexandra became a familiar sight on the site clipboard under her armwork boots, dusted in cement hair pulled up, but somehow always managing to escape into loose strands. Residents who once whispered about the billionaire now waved at her from porches. One afternoon, she sat on a plastic chair while a grandmother explained the history of the neighborhood in vivid detail. Alexandra listened, really listened, until the grandmother finally said, "I've lived here through 4 mayors and 2 hurricanes. You're the first rich person who ever sat in my yard without making me feel small." Alexandra blinked at the words, feeling something inside her shift an ache and a hope colliding. Meanwhile, Mia had become the unofficial mascot of the project. She colored new room designs in the dirt while the workers laughed and asked if she planned to take over her dad's job someday. Maybe, she piped confidently, but only if I can have my own reading room. Every time she said it, Gavin felt something tighten behind his ribs, pride mixed with fear, and an aching desire to give her something stable. Something permanent. Something like home. The relationship between Gavin and Alexandra changed too quietly naturally in ways neither tried to define. They argued about tile choices. They ate sandwiches on unfinished staircases. They shared the same thermos of coffee when mornings ran cold. And some evenings when the workers clocked out and the sun dipped behind the skyline, they found themselves lingering alone on the roof of the unfinished structure. Not talking about the project. Talking about life. About the wife Gavin had lost the dreams he'd buried. About Alexandra's father, the ghost she kept trying to live up to. About the mistakes they'd made, and the people they'd failed, and the people they were trying not to fail again. One night, Alexandra admitted quietly, "Sometimes I think I became CEO just because I didn't know how else to fill the space he left behind." Gavin turned to her. "You're filling it with more good than you realize." She looked at him, then really looked, eyes soft, voice quieter than the wind brushing past them. "Am I? Yes," he said, and he meant it. One evening near dusk, Gavin found Mia asleep at the kitchen table surrounded by crayons and a half-eaten granola bar. A soft snore puffed from her lips. She'd drawn a new version of the dream house one with wide windows, a porch swing, and a little garden. He carried her to bed, tucking her in. Then he stepped out onto the balcony, the air cooled, the street buzzing faintly with nighttime life. A figure stood below. Alexandra. She looked up, caught his eye, and smiled in a way that made something inside him shift dangerously close to something like longing. He went down to meet her. They walked slowly along the sidewalk side by side in easy silence. It wasn't awkward, it wasn't forced. It was right. She told him she'd finalized the grant application for the literacy program. He told her he'd modified the reading room design because the acoustics were too sharp for children. They passed the entrance of the building, and as they reached the steps, Mia stirred in his arms, half asleep, head tucked against his shoulder. Then she mumbled, groggy and sincere, "Good night, Mommy Alex." Gavin froze. Alexandra froze. Mia didn't even realize what she'd said. But the world did. Gavin's breath caught, his heart hammered, his arms tightened instinctively around his daughter. Alexandra stared at him, eyes shimmering with something raw and unguarded. Hope, fear, longing, pain. She whispered, I should. Her voice faltered. Should what? Leave stay pretend she didn't hear it. Ask what it meant. For a long moment she stood on the steps, caught between every world she'd ever lived in and the one she was starting to want. And before she could decide, the door behind them creaked, the hall light flickered, and the night air tightened around them like a held breath, leaving all three of them suspended in a moment, too fragile to touch. The grand opening of Vale Community Haven arrived on a Saturday morning, painted in soft sunlight, gentle enough to feel like forgiveness, warm enough to feel like a beginning. From blocks away, Gavin could already hear it, the bright rising laughter of children, the shuffle of neighbors in their best shirts, the cheerful hum of volunteers stringing last-minute banners across the entrance. It didn't sound like the old building anymore. It sounded alive. He adjusted Mia's little backpack as she tugged impatiently at his hand. Bah, hurry. They said the reading room is open now. I know, sweetheart. I designed it. I promise it's not going anywhere, he teased. She giggled, skipping ahead. Gavin followed slowly, taking it all in the courtyard, now paved with clean bricks, the refurbished hallways echoing with new footsteps, the smell of fresh lumber and optimism lingering like a blessing. The community center shone not because it was perfect, but because it was theirs. And at the entrance, surrounded by reporters holding cameras and residents holding gratitude, stood Alexandra Vale. She wore a simple cream blouse and trousers, no armor of power today, no sleek CEO persona. She looked peaceful, fulfilled, human in a way Gavin knew she rarely let herself be. When her eyes found his, something warm bloomed across her face. Gavin, she breathed. Alexandra. Mia darted forward and grabbed Alexandra's hand, tugging eagerly. Come see, come see. Alexandra laughed, letting herself be pulled inside. All right, lead the way. Gavin followed behind them, a strange ache spreading softly through his chest when he was beginning to understand. Inside the center unfolded like a story told in color and noise. A mural of neighborhood memories stretched across one wall. A playroom crackled with squeals and tiny footsteps. Volunteers helped elderly residents with new tablets in the tech corner. Teens hovered near the recording booth, thrilled by microphones and sound mixers. The Haven wasn't just a building. It was proof that a community no one bothered to see still mattered. Gavin felt a subtle pressure at his side. Mr. Holt. He turned to find the mayor, hand extended warmly. Your designs are extraordinary. This center is going to change lives. Gavin flushed, embarrassed but grateful. Thank you, sir. But it was a team effort. If more architects worked the way you do, the mayor added, we'd have a very different city. The word architect echoed in his ears, soft, careful like a title he wasn't sure he'd earned but desperately hoped he was growing into. Farther inside, Alexandra was cornered by a crowd of reporters firing questions. Miss Vale, what inspired this project? Why invest in a community space instead of condos? How does this reflect Vale Group's future direction? Alexandra lifted a hand gently. Today isn't about me, she said firmly. Today is about them. And she pointed not to the cameras, not to the executives standing in the back, but toward the residents, toward the children, toward the building itself. Then she glimpsed Gavin in the corner of her eye. Her expression softened again. Mia tugged her sleeve. Miss Alex, come see the special room. Alexandra smiled. Of course. Mia led them to a quiet hallway painted in soft earth tones. At the end stood a small room, sunlight pouring in from a wide window, shelves lined with books, beanbags scattered like colorful petals. But it wasn't the room that made Alexandra stop in her tracks. It was what hung on the wall, a framed drawing. Mia and Dad's first dream house. The version Mia had drawn months ago, before eviction notices, before boardroom battles, before anything had changed. The edges were still wrinkled from the water spill, and below it a small plaque, dedicated to every family who thought they didn't deserve a second chance. Alexandra covered her mouth, emotion sweeping through her like a tide. Her voice came out a whisper. "Gavin, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said softly from behind her. "This place is about new beginnings. Yours too." Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the air near the frame, as if afraid touching it would break the moment. Behind them, the sounds of the haven faded, the laughter, the conversations, the opening day chaos. The room seemed carved out of silence, a place meant for truth. Mia hopped onto a beanbag and looked up at them with bright eyes. "Bah, Miss Alex," she said, "if this place is home for everybody, where's our home?" Gavin's breath caught. He turned slowly toward Alexandra. There were 100 things he could have said, 100 ways this moment could splinter, but he chose honesty. He knelt beside Mia, exhaling softly. "Sweetheart, home isn't a building." He looked up at Alexandra's trembling eyes. "It's people." His voice warmed, gentled. "Home is where we're safe, where we're loved, where we take care of each other. So, if Miss Alex wants to be part of that, then our home can be anywhere." Mia blinked, then turned to Alexandra, earnest and hopeful. "So, are we a family now?" The room held its breath. Alexandra knelt slowly, her knees touching the floor, her eyes meeting Mia's at level. Her voice quivered with something she had kept locked away for years. "If you want me in your family," her voice cracked, "then yes, we are." Mia threw her arms around her neck. Alexandra let out a soft, broken laugh and held her tight, held her like she had been waiting a lifetime for someone small and fierce to choose her. Gavin stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on Alexandra's back. She leaned into the touch, not out of weakness but trust. Trust she had never given anyone before. Later, as the sun began to set, the haven filled with the sound of children playing and neighbors celebrating something they'd almost lost hope of having again, belonging. Narration rose gently like a closing lullaby. A single dad who believed his dreams had died in the shadow of hardship. A woman who believed her heart had been buried under years of power and pressure, and a little girl who believed in both of them from the very beginning. The camera would slowly pull back, revealing the light spilling from the windows, the hum of life filling every newly built corner. Between broken blueprints and battered walls, they found something no amount of wealth could buy. No title could guarantee. No past wound could destroy. A home. A family. A new beginning built not from perfection, but from love, courage, and a second chance they finally believed they deserved. And with that, the story settled into its final, gentle truth. Everyone deserves a new blueprint for their life. Everyone deserves a place to belong. And for Gavin, Mia, and Alexandra, they had finally found it. And that, my friends, brings our story to a close. But before we go, let's take a moment to breathe in what this journey really meant, because this wasn't just a story about a single dad, or a billionaire, or a building saved from demolition. It was a reminder that every life, no matter how ordinary, how tired, how overlooked, carries a blueprint worth protecting. It was a reminder that kindness can change the direction of someone's entire world, and that sometimes the homes we find are not made of brick or steel, but of people who choose us, stay with us, and believe in us when life feels impossible. If you've ever experienced a moment like that, a stranger stepping in at the right time, a helping hand when things felt hopeless, or a second chance you never thought you'd get, I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs today. And before you go, let me know, where are you watching from? I always love seeing this beautiful community coming together from all over the world. If this story touched you, inspired you, or simply kept you listening until the very end, please remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story filled with hope, healing, and humanity. Thank you truly for spending your time with us today. Your presence, your comments, your support, they mean more than you know. Until next time, my friends, stay safe, stay hopeful, and never forget everyone deserves a new blueprint for their life.